Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about stringing the loom. I've had a few questions since the last video about this loom on how to do that, and we've got a project that we can do that with, so we'll use that as an example. So for this particular project, I've got 4 different pieces of beadwork that I need to do, and I will be able to do it so that the way it's laid out, 2 will be on each side of the loom. Now, this will make sense in a second as we think about this. Anytime you string up your loom, I don't care how long it is, you have to make sure it's going to be big enough for the project that you want to do. This piece that I'm about to make, again, there are 4 elements, 2 of which are 26 inches, 2 of which are 12 inches. So in taking out our measurements, we can look pretty easily and make sure that we're spaced out. So again, this loom is somewhere about 48 inches point to point here, and that gives us enough space for a 12-inch strip space so that we have loose threads to tie off, and then again the 26-inch strip space to tie that off. We'll need space on each end of each of these pieces, and then the same thing coming back. So then again we have 1, 2 on the reverse, 3, 4. Now that makes sense when you consider that when you're doing the beadwork, the whole thing will slide around this loom so that you can always work in one central place. I'll show you that again when we actually get this tied up. So again, our first step is to make our measurements. We know how long this needs to be, and so the next thing is that we're going to actually take our thread and tie it down. This is cotton crochet thread. You can get it at any major craft store. It's relatively cheap. It's going to hold up really well. It's nice and thin. There's not a lot of fuzzies and so on, so it's a really good piece to use when you're doing loom work. You can get it in different colors, so you can play around with that however you want to do. Generally, most of the old work that I've seen, a lot of it comes on white, and so it just seems like that's what's commonly used today for a lot of projects as well. But again, I think it's kind of user's preference. When it really comes down to it, all you need to make sure you have is something that's not going to stretch too significantly, and that cotton's going to hold up pretty well for you. Don't use a Nymo or something else for this piece, because that'll stretch and pull and you won't get good effects when you're done. Now, it's real simple. This has already been wrapped around from this side under to this side. It's not going to be tied to the loom itself. It will be tied around the loom, and that's important because if you tie it to the loom, you won't be able to slide it at all. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take my end here and I'm going to make a real simple knot that I can tie on itself here, and it doesn't have to be anything complicated. All it really needs is just a couple of overhand knots to cinch it in, and then that way when you're ready to do your work and everything else, it'll pull down on itself and take a bite in and be good to go. At that point, you're going to have yourself a knot, and this piece will now be able to pull down and cinch this down on itself, giving you the tightness that you need. That's what's most important in this piece here, because what you want to do is tie it to itself and double it back so that you can continue wrapping your loom however much you need. We'll talk about that in the next video, which will talk about how to finish stringing it and tying it off. Again, just to show you the idea here, when I bead, I work in one central area, and as I get done with that beadwork, I can move it up or down the loom because it's not tied to the loom again. So that always gives me a working space in the same spot. That means all 4 elements can be beaded right here as I just keep feeding it down the loom as it goes. Works really well for me. I know other people have other preferences, but this is just another way to skin that cat. So again, it's important to keep in mind, cotton thread, for this step, you don't have to wax it or anything like that. Just wrap it. Don't pull it too tight. If you pull these really, really, really tight, when you get it off the loom, it'll make your piece buckle, and you don't want that. So keep it just nice, tight enough, and we'll talk more about wrapping it up in the next video. Thanks for your time.